absolutely a pleasure to talk to you today. For us was today midday, for you was today morning, because the difference between New York and Holland is big. But thank you for being here, friends. The conversation, I think we will continue the conversation. If you allow me just to be, like continue the conversation that we had with Tim, because was a really a open conversation, like a conversation you would have with a friend. Was not a formal thing about telling about what we are doing, but just more sharing about our experience. And allow me to share with you a little bit about our background. My name is Oscar Rosa. I am Salvadorian from birth, but I live in the Netherlands for the last 30 years. I study in the Netherlands. In the first week of my studies, I made my colleague Sjoerd, and we became friends during our studies, and the friendship is after 30 years continue being the same. And we have a company together called Salt.com. This company became a cooperative, and we will tell you a little bit more why we become from holding company to becoming a cooperative. But just allow me to share with you one of the most important things I think we have at our organization called Salt.com is that the purpose that we have, the purpose that we share in common with all the members of Salt.com. And the purpose is very simple. It's not even long. It talks about how Salt.com believe in inspiring and training and accompanying millions of people to wish to promote unity and trust among people. People who aspire to transform their workplaces into purpose communities. People who wish to develop themselves and who recognize the power of the human spirit to love, to cooperate, and to serve. People who wish to reshape the world through meaningful work. This is the purpose of Salt.com. And we do this through building capacity. It's a concept that you, friends, the ones who know Teal also and self-organizing communities, are actually acquainted with this concept of what does it mean actually to build capacities. The theme of our presentation today is called, actually, we call it building resilient communities, learning from experience, working with the youth students in El Salvador. And this is a project that before I will go into the project, I will allow to my colleague Sjoerd Luteyn to present himself, to introduce himself, and then I will just tell you a little bit about the background of the project, and then Sjoerd will present fully how we are operating in this project. Sure.
Thank you, Oscar, and hello, Armin, and Deborah, and Tim again, and Anusha, and Bianca, if you're listening with us. Super nice that you're here. In all honesty, I prefer to have conversations rather than presentations. So if at any moment anyone wants to ask a question, add something, enrich, offer perspective, please let's do it, because conversations are much more needed than presentations. Good, Tim. You can also use the chat to converse if that's more convenient. So let me just introduce myself. My name is Sjoerd Luteyn. This morning with Tim, I spelled it out how I often write it when I'm abroad.
One M.
Exactly. This kind of helps sometimes. I founded with Oscar Salt.com more than 20 years ago, and it's been a long journey until now. And one of the things that really struck me very early on when we started with Salt.com is the idea that we could actually think about how organizations could become a source for good, to help to transform society for the better. And in time, we've learned a lot and did a lot of projects. And it took us a little while to recognize that what we were thinking of was a different kind of community. As the Teal community is inspired by Frédéric Laloux, I remember that in 2013, Oscar and I had a little article going on purpose. And it came to Laloux's plate just before he published his work, and he also responded to it. And I think a lot of the work that Mr. Laloux has done is actually quite parallel with the work that we've done at Soul.com and are still doing. But we recognized pretty soon that we were talking about a different kind of organization, something that we call communities. So since then, we've been learning about building resilient communities. Hi, Carol, good to have you. And I just a little bit of my background. I'm sitting in my one of my small rooms in my house where I work since COVID from home. We used to travel quite a lot, and now we're doing a lot online. I'm here with my family, who's sometimes walking in and out. So if that might happen, just welcome them into the party. And what we'll be sharing today is because when we were asked to share something here at the Teal Around the World conference, was to share a real story, something that we actually did. So no conceptual framework, no theory, but like the practice of it. So we said we're actually in the midst of a project that is happening right now, and Oscar will present more in detail the scope of what we're going to do right now. But I just wanted to introduce something very small. So as Soul, we have become a cooperative, meaning that more and more people can join our community. And our community is of people who want to help to build capacities in others, to transform their companies into communities, or their neighborhood into communities, who really want to help educational institutions to function more like communities. And we've been learning a lot. And one of the things that we've been doing is also doing projects abroad, like beyond the Netherlands, because we often realize that there's so much to learn from and with others. And as Oscar has a strong relationship, obviously, with El Salvador, as he's from there, one of the friends that we started out with a long time ago already is a friend of Oscar called Fernando, and it started with a conversation. And when we were talking to Tim this morning, we talked about the project. He said, how did it start? How did you start a project in El Salvador with many students? And it actually started the same way as Soul has started, with a friendship, a small conversation. And that's really such a foundational step in the process of how to engage into transformative processes. And so from this friendship, 3 people, 2 friends of that person, Fernando, came to the Netherlands from El Salvador to be trained in some of our work. So with 3 people, they came to the Netherlands, did a course, went back and started to have many conversations. Within a year, we started a project, and within a period of 2-3 months, we trained 150 people in the course that's called Trust. Here's the course, the material. And it's one of our foundational courses of how to become a community builder. It's called Trust, Reshape the World. And it teaches people how to learn to listen, how to have and engage in meaningful conversation, and how to reflect upon our actions and our words. And 150 young people, youth in particular, took that course and started to take action. Now, these people were all ex-students, former students who were sent with scholarships to the United States for courses, or did courses English in El Salvador. And they were in some sort of an alumni organization. And they started to transform the organization immediately from like a more or less inactive organization, alumni organization, to an active organization where they started to engage with others, started to build relationships. It was really interesting to see how easy, or how not so easy, but how active the community was, and started to become, to actually contribute to the environment. So the project continued. It started with something very small, but then it started to grow, and we started to identify there's something there that may be interesting. And then in the midst of that project, COVID came. And so we were in a different world. Something else started here in Europe. We were working with students at the University of Switzerland, and we started with a conversation on hope after 3 weeks in COVID. And we asked a few questions. For example, how did COVID change your current life? And the second question that we asked is, how would you like COVID to change your life? And what was interesting is that by the end of the conversation turned into hope. So we realized it was a very interesting conversation. And so what happened is that we talked with some of the people we've trained in El Salvador, and together with the people there, they started to engage others. And within a 6 week, Oscar, it was 6 weeks, I guess, right? Six weeks, more than 2,000 youth engaged in these conversations on hope. And it was so interesting to see how it was like growing and it was like spreading, and how people were attracted to having meaningful conversations together, to listening to one another. And from that project, we followed with another online course, because then we started to feel like, hey, we can actually do meaningful stuff online. And we engaged with 70 youth in a program called Agent of Change. And this program that we have developed called Agent of Change is really an important program, because it helps people, and this is like at the core of the work of Soul, to become protagonists of their journey. How to make their workplaces meaningful, how to make their educational institutions meaningful workplaces, their streets, their lives. And so it's a very action-oriented course. And that course with 70 people online was really fantastic, because it's an intensive program. It's not one conversation, it's a whole series of conversations and people taking actions in their house, in their neighborhood, trying to be like a source for good, and then learning together from that course. So once we started with that project, we realized how much impact it started to have. And this is where the next project came from. And maybe Oscar, you can take it from here, because I think this is like the birthplace, some historical context of where the project is now. And then maybe we can reflect a little bit on some of the things that we've learned from this project when it comes to building resilient communities. Oh, you see, we're all with kids.
Who is that, Oscar? Want to say hello? Hi. Who is that, Oscar?
It's my little son. I have 3 children. One is 21, the other is 20, and this one is 9. But he's going to bed right now. Okay.
Hi. No, he's not going to bed.
Bye-bye. Yes, Sjoerd was mentioning one of the things that I thank you, Sjoerd, for the introduction. I just wanted to mention is the whole idea of building resilient communities, because this is a topic. And the whole, the process of building a community is a process that cannot be done from outside. A process need to be done from within. That means that you need to become a part of the community if you want to build a community. And one of the things that of the stages of the community, and you guys until you know that is something that you cannot buy. A community cannot be buy. You cannot sell a community. I never heard someone saying, I will sell my community, or I can buy your community. Why not? It's because communities belong to all the participants. That means that communities are places for universal participation. And the stages of the developing of the community is when you get this, you go from the individual to a core group. This core group become a group. This group give birth to new groups. These groups become a movement. The movement become a community. It's a long way to go. It's a long way to go. And these communities are the birthplaces of society. And these societies become civilizations. It's all this connected, and this logic of that a community is actually the embryo of a civilization. And if we don't learn how to work with communities, we cannot build societies. It's impossible to build a society without not knowing how to build a community. Therefore, we cannot skip this point of community. But coming back to the idea of transforming companies into communities, and the difference between companies have employees and communities have members, is the whole different way that we relate into this, what we call community, or what we call company. And this is the relation what we were mentioning before, this idea of the quality of the relation define the quality of the outcome. And the life is made of all the relations that we have. The relations we have with nature, the relations we have with our family, with our peer, with our friends, with ourselves. All these relations become what we call life. Building communities go through different stages. You learn, or you build a community that is actually a learning community. This is the first step, is learning. But when the community is learning, you need to actually build certain capacities like openness to learn, humbleness of learning. All these stages of learning create this what we call learning communities. But you cannot stay forever in this stage of learning. Then when you learn, then you start to practice. Therefore, you become a community of practices. You go from the stages of learning communities to communities of practice. Then you become a vibrant community that is alive, that is constantly changing, evolving. Is something that constantly organic, in an organic way, is changing and growing. And then you have a resilient community. Because building a resilient community is not the sum of the individuals, as we know that communities are more than the sum of the membership. A community is a living organism that is constantly changing and growing. Therefore, the quality of resilience in the community is one of the most important qualities. But collective resilience is different than the individual resilience. And we define the whole idea of what we understand as a resilient communities is this capacity of rising together. This capacity of actually to recover from within. This is what we mean when we said building resilient communities. And one of the things that going to the project in El Salvador, we had identified with the friends, because social and economical development of social transformation is not something that the learned do for the ignorance. It's not something that the North do from the South. It's not something that the developed do for the underdeveloped. It's not a present that we are giving to humanity as a Christmas present. It's not something that one section of the society does for the other section. It's something that we are invited to participate, that we all have the responsibility to do. Therefore, everyone must do it. It's not something that one does for the other. We had identified with the friends there three major problems of three major challenges that need to be addressed. One was poverty. The second was the illegal and legal migration of young people to the United States. And the third was criminality, that was a result of many other things. What we have created, actually, is a social impact project as a response to this challenge. There is a quote, friends, that we love to use in our work, and many of you who read a lot knows about Buckminster Fuller, this famous American fellow. Buckminster Fuller had mentioned in one of his beautiful books that actually you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you need to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Then create alternatives. By creating alternatives, you are creating possibilities. By creating possibilities, you are creating actually spaces for action. When you act, things change. And one of the first steps of change is actually this idea of changing your mind. Change in mind becomes a change in deed and change in the world. When consciousness is expanded, so is the potentiality for action. And when people become conscious about identifying certain challenges, then can actually create not solutions, but to create spaces for options that can actually be the response for these challenges. The response of these three major problems, friends, became promoting collective prosperity. Is actually the response to poverty. And we do this through access to knowledge and the universal education. The second one, reducing the illegal and legal migration, we do this by creating meaningful work where people can dedicate their lives and have meaning. And the third, reducing criminality, we try to reduce this by building relations based on trust and building communities. We do this with a process that we call capacity building. Building the capacity in every participant and becoming from protagonists, actually becoming from participant protagonists of their own future, becoming agents of change of society. And this is not a romantic sentence that I mentioned. This is not a romantic thought. This is actually one of the realities that we have been doing for the last 20 years. And now in El Salvador, working together with the American Embassy, the alumni from the American Embassy, 8 universities, and the Ministry of Education, we are training 3,000 youth from the ages from 15 until 25. 50% of them are girls. 300 plus facilitators from universities becoming facilitators of these agents of change programs. And also they learn English by the American Embassy, provided by a course that is certified by the American Embassy, that they can access other education than just Spanish education, that they can have work in other languages, and they can stay in the country and become contributors to the transformation of the country. And they are participating on the 150 teachers of universities and 50 members of the alumni association from the American Embassy. And this in a period of 2 years. And this is what we call building resilient communities that can actually stand to any of the tests that societies are suffering at this moment. And we do this by building capacity within the community that people can rise up and serve their own communities.
So, folks, think about all this. I'm curious. I want you to begin to think about what captures your attention, what draws your interest when this idea of building capacity or transforming poverty into prosperity, that the notion of working with people where they are as they are and making them the protagonist in their own story. I think that's an amazingly powerful articulation of part of the value here is that beginning to have the person see themselves as the hero, as the solution, as opposed to the helpless victim, and all of that as a part of a transformational process. And so I'm curious, like, begin to think about what questions you might have about how this was done, or what further information that you can offer us. And as you do that, I'm going to ask Oscar or Sjoerd, I'm curious, is there a story of someone in particular that evokes a lot of this journey of discovery that you are enabling people to take? Someone in El Salvador, perhaps, that you can remember that really had a moment of awakening or transition that was evocative of all this?
I remember when when the program that I told about with the 70 people online doing this Agents of Change course, I wasn't like being part of all the steps, because a lot of the conversations were in Spanish and my Spanish is not so good. But I was part of some of the sessions, and I remember the closing session when there were like 60, 70 people. And the first thing that struck me, actually, that in this online world during COVID, over the course of more than, I think, 9 sessions, there were still 70 to 60, 70 people. So all of them participated. Like, this was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was the great variety between the people. There were El Salvadorian teachers who were living in the US. There were youth. There were people that were all over the place, and they were like operating as one. It was quite interesting to see that in all those 70 squares, people had an equal amount of space, and they were all like contributing and adding, and it was really lively, and people were sharing their knowledge and experiences very generously. But one of the things that struck me in particular was that one of the participants, and it was just noticed at the end, she told us how much effort, like, it was a very simple question, like, how much time does it cost you to get here? And she told us that she traveled for 1.5 hours through dangerous territory to just be present at the course, borrowed a computer of a friend, walked across the street, and then the other way, 1.5 hours back. So, and then someone said, like, that's a lot of effort. Is that safe? And then she said, what do you mean? It's an opportunity. And then we've learned that she actually brought the course to the women in her village. And I thought, like, that was, like, for me, like, so, your question, like, what is transformative for us is to see how people take on and just share generously what they have learned with people some others because they think it's meaningful or it's valuable or and then immediately share it. So I think that's just like one interesting effect. Like if
Yeah,
people get
exactly,
touched,
exactly.
like, so this was, I think, one of the things that really struck me.
Right. So folks, I'm sure if you have questions, just jump in, just ask your questions. Let's begin to talk about this. In fact, I think Carol, you were smiling there. You have something you want to add to the conversation?
Well, first of all, thank you for everything, for your work and being here, and all of us that are here with you. It's really a gift. And well, I'm from Brazil. I'm in São Paulo now.
Mm-hmm.
So trying not to speak Portuguese or my Portuñol, that's how we call it. I don't speak Spanish, only Portuñol. And I was thinking about that spiritual concept that abundance is all around us.
Yes.
Every time, everywhere. And so the transformation from poverty to abundance, it's a change of mindset, and you're being able to do this through your courses and what you're developing, and it really interests me a lot. It's really interesting to me, and it resonates with the fact that we can't empower anyone because it must come from within. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the same change of looking at the world and seeing abundance, or
Mm-hmm.
looking to yourself and seeing power. And
Great.
that was, it reminded me of your work reminded me of the regenerative movement that's growing. And I'm really happy because I feel I'm a bit part of it in a way, but you're a great part of it, doing what you're doing. And there's last year I did a course of based on that book by Daniel Wall, you know, Regenerative Cultures. He received a big award from the British last year because of that. And this year I'm going to do a course on regenerative leadership that also resonates with what you're doing. And well, I'm working in an enterprise, in a company that it's horizontal from the beginning, 99, and so deal with this kind of with this matters on a daily basis, but not it's not been it's a change that came with COVID for me, because I was an architect before. And
Great.
yeah, and it's good because I was looking for ways to help people develop on the skills they need to have to enjoy all that a horizontal enterprise can offer, because we have so much freedom to offer, but people seem to have a hard time on being able to enjoy it, to really fully aproveitar.
So there's a lot there to talk about. I think abundance and regenerative business and horizontal. And the thing I was really struck with, as background again, we had a great conversation this morning. And one thing in particular that I was so powerfully taken with was your ability, because of the experience and the way you approach these things, to make obviously everyone understands the power of abundance thinking, and often it's an idea, but translating these things into reality, into an experience, into a self-generating phenomena that begins to replicate itself out to the fact that someone takes your course and takes it back to their village, is a different level of experience. And I just want you to jump in anywhere and talk about any of this stuff that comes to you that can you continue helping us understand what you're doing?
If you allow me, Tim, just to make a comment, Carol, I was mentioning also to Tim that Sjoerd and I were invited to Bhutan a couple of years ago.
Yes.
The government of Bhutan invited us to do a presentation in one of these global conference about happiness in Bhutan. Our presentation was building an economy of abundance. And how all these paradigms of scarcity, because all of us who had studied in the university knows that if you want to make a successful product, you must make it desirable. Therefore, you make few of them, because if you make too much, then the price doesn't go up. You know that if you have few, the price go up. This is the whole idea of scarcity. But this idea of this scarcity is going a little bit wild in other concepts. For example, the scarcity of time. You know, I don't have time for nothing. You know, the scarcity of resources. Although many resources, we need to really take care of the resources because there's limit. But the scarcity of generosity, for example. You know, the scarcity of friendship. You know, the scarcity of money.
Yes.
You know, all these weird concepts that make us, you know, think and want to have things that are not needed. You know, we need to take what we need and the rest leave it for others that they also need. But the idea of generosity, for example, just to give you one idea, and this is something that Sjoerd and I have been doing for 20 years. And I said to Tim today morning, Tim, if I can give my experience and the knowledge I had accumulated in the years, please be my guest. Knowledge, we must be generous with knowledge. Knowledge doesn't need to be protected behind walls of copyright, extreme copyrights, you know, and extreme patents, that anything will be for me forever and ever, and the eternity and perpetuity because I invented it. You know, whatever we want. Knowledge, if you don't give knowledge away, knowledge is like water. Water needs to run in order to continue being pure. Otherwise, putrefy and will become contaminated, and you cannot drink the water anymore. The knowledge needs to be shared. And to be generous in knowledge is not easy, because knowledge goes together with the concept of power.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Maybe to add one thing, Tim, and also Carol, thanks for your comment. I think one of the things you asked also, like, how do you take it from conceptual ideas and inspirational ideas into something that actually changes? And I think, like, core to our work is not to teach. Actually, we don't teach. I don't do that stuff. There's enough teachers in the world. A core to our work is to ask a question and then try to translate it into action.
Yeah.
And then on that action, we need to reflect.
Yeah.
And that is essential. There's a continuous cycle of taking actions, reflection, and consultation with people. So when we have the Agent of Change program, for example, there's one specific course that we run that's on addressing racial inequity. There are questions that help you to grow your capacity to listen.
Yeah.
And I think, like, what is essential in our work is that, and then this is something that we've learned over time. So we started out with helping people, and then came up with ideas and programs, and then all of that we realized did not really sustain. Like, when we were gone, you know, the change was gone, not fully, but partially. Yeah. And it was only in time that we started to learn that what was needed was what we call capacity building. And capacity building is not just the idea to have a skill. So, for example, you can have a skill to make an Excel sheet, right? And we can teach you how to make an Excel sheet. But to develop the capacity to listen is a complex notion of many insights that you require about yourself and about listening. You need knowledge to be able to develop your capacity to listen. But then you need qualities, human qualities and attitudes that help you to be a good listener. And then you also need skills and abilities to apply it.
Yeah.
So this is really when we work on with people and growing their capacity to become a community builder, we practice. And I just want to give you a very practical example. Maybe that makes it like real. So one of the things that we work on when, for example, we talk about addressing racial inequity is that we need to grow our capacity to listen. Not just listen to others, but listen in order for other people to share their stories. But because many people actually are not ready to talk. for many different reasons. So it's not just listen to be interested in the other. It is listen to really allow the other that he wants to be heard, right? So when we do the exercise, it's a very simple exercise. We have a question. And the question is, how has your life been impacted by race? And for 10 minutes, one person can share, think out loud, and the other person is not allowed to respond. Not verbally, like you are not allowed to put your mute on, right? Because I see all your mute buttons on here and you're good listeners, but no, so for 10 minutes, you're not allowed to talk, to speak, to hum like, yeah, yeah. Also, we encourage you to not use your verbal expression, like, or just calm down. Actually try to calm down your mind, even that. And after 10 minutes, you switch roles and you think out loud, how has your life been impacted by race? And we've seen and experienced, I've experienced myself, it's quite shocking to be both a speaker and a listener, actually. And after 20 minutes, or 2 times 10 minutes, we come back and we reflect. So this is action, immediate action. It's not conceptual talking, it's not exploring ideas, it's telling from your own life's experience what you have been through. And after 20 minutes, there's 2 questions. How was it to listen? And how was it to speak? So it's not focusing on the content of the conversation, it's focusing on the capacity that you're building. And so this is the practical way how we work with people. And so when we worked with the friends in El Salvador, they, after a session like that, they immediately go out and do these exercises with friends. Right. So it's not like they're doing a conceptual exercise, they're practicing. And through the practicing, you reflect and you say, what have I learned from this experience? What quality has really helped me? And I think that when we were talking with Tin this morning, what makes it transformative? Because that's the question also that we have here at Teal, what makes it transformative? Is that it's not just the accumulation of skills that we have. You awaken in yourself qualities, the people who participate, that are like open for every human being. Generosity, friendship, love, kindness, all these qualities sound vague until you apply them, until you offer them in your work. And I think this is like, Tim, when you asked the question, how does it work to get people into changing something or doing something or transforming? It's the fact that we can make an experience. I'm not telling how to, because you have to do it in your own way, but I can offer you a question and a reflection to grow your capacity.
If I may add one thing, just when they answer the question, what make it transformative? When we talk about capacity building, the first question that many people get in mind is what capacities? And this is the second question. The first question is what for? What for I'm building these capacities? And the answer to this question is building capacity in order to serve. You know, you serve your society, serve your family, serve your friends, serve your company. You know, service is a mental state, is a state of mind, is something that is not just action. You know, an action imbued by a spirit of service can transform humanity. Service is one of the greatest powers of the human spirit, like the power of love, unity, justice, you know, all these quite difficult concepts. Service is the same. And therefore, if we talk about what is transformative in all of this, is that a person, a human being, can go through a process of learning while this person decides to stand up and serve other human beings. This is what makes the difference.
Yeah. Something I just want to add as a comment, and I really want to hear everybody, is that one thing that really struck me after our conversation was, so these are concepts, or maybe some of their words, and truth, love, you know, but in us, in all of us, we know what truth is. It's there. It's an innate part of our being. We know what honesty is. We understand love. We certainly, love is a reference point we all have some connection to, like where we have some kind of deep, extraordinary connection to somebody, like it's there. And so this ability to have people connect deeper is transformative, and it's so powerfully contagious. you can imagine. So folks, what questions do you have, or what comments or observations about the work that they're doing at soul.com? We'll wait. Anyone at all? Just
I'm trying it, sure, Oscar. So
very good.
there's a lot of things going on in my mind, and the first thing is actually that I think what you're describing here is one of the two essential parts, which for me has been missing in quite a number of the talks I've been listening today. So we've been talking a lot about leadership and how a Teal organization can set up and what good leaders are. And I think the essence is actually that if we want to change something, you have to do both. You have to have autonomy, creativity, and whatever leading, and you have to have a belonging in a group. And you have to have both in balance. And if you don't have it, there's no way of, for me personally, there's no way how, I think we're then just looking at the symptoms. Yeah, you can do a lot with Teal, and you can look at the symptoms of what the society does as it is. And I've just read a book about globalizing addiction, and what struck me there is actually that the essence is that free market society as it is actually, even at its prosper and best times, in its core is what the author says, dislocation. So it's basically, you probably know, there are bringing people from the psych, what is it called, psycho, I don't know the word, but just so that strikes me. And I think and I also I think what you've been describing, so many people, when I talk to them about those things, they think how you want to make change. And I basically say, because the usual things is like, I get patterns, people are resistant to change and whatever, and I like your approach. And I also believe that as fast as change things can happen in a negative way with COVID, they can also happen in a positive way. Yeah. As you might not be able to forecast it, or you might not know where it's going to happen, but as long as you plant enough seeds, you have a good possibility that there's something going to happen. And what it also needs is, of course, a lot of protective rooms for people actually being able to start doing their inner work if they want to. And if you go deeper into it, it's probably, for most of us, it's not easy to do inner work, and even recognize that I would need some inner work, or that would be good for me. But then we go way back to childhood and everything which connects to it, and education. And you would need to tackle it actually all at once. And so if usually at that point of conversation, I have no answer to that, but that's striking to me. At that point of conversation, everybody's saying, okay, I mean, what you're talking about, you're never going to get it. Yeah. And I say, well, but does it mean I don't try? So that's and the last thing I want to say is I'd like to live for, let's say, more than, if I would be able, if I would know from now that I live 30 to 40 years from now. So, and I'm almost convinced that what we've seen with COVID is, I will see more in their lifetime in terms of radical changes, wherever it comes to. I don't care, and it doesn't worry me, but I don't care. There will be whatever. It's climate change, it might be dictatorship, it might be financial economic crisis, it doesn't matter. So I have to adapt anyway at this point in time. So it's maybe nothing I can do about something right now, but I have, if it comes, I have to adapt, and it works or it doesn't. But I can actually try something to do, and I can start now, and that's actually what I'm also trying to do. And so yeah, that was just what was on my mind. So I'm going to stop.
Fantastic, Armin. And I think there were a lot of interesting things. I remember Buckminster Fuller, who we quoted before. You know, he about talking about resistance. At one point, he said, "People don't resist change; they resist being changed." Right. Yeah. And so I think this is at the core of the idea that people have to become the protagonist. So this is why in our work we work a lot with questions. Yeah. We ask questions and we don't give definitions. because if people become part of the imagination of what they're about to do, they can respond to that, and with that they become responsible. Just to give you an example, and I told it this morning to Tim, like we had more than 10,000 people. We asked the following question. It's a very simple question, and it's often transformative. The question is, imagine that your company would be a community. What would it look like? Describe its characteristics. And the interesting thing is that more than 80% of what people say is similar. People have this knowledge. They know what. And then the second question is, do you want to work there? And then most people obviously start to cheer up and say, yes, good. Now let's start constructing it, right? We don't need an academic study to do it. We can start. Now, I think one of the things that we talked about earlier is this idea of resilience. And I think Oscar talked about it very briefly, but I think what he said was really striking to me, at least, again, whenever I hear it, like the idea of resilience within the concept of community being like the capacity, it's a capacity actually, one could say, to recover from within, right? And I think what is interesting, if you think about cover from within, what does that mean in community life? And I think there's a fundamental difference how we look at organizations nowadays, or if you would, to organizations from the lens of community. And there's that in community, the relationship is first. Yeah. And this is where the resilience comes from. This is where the inner healing comes from. Because if you can depend upon the relationships to recover, if you can depend on the need to be together, to fulfill a shared purpose, to share your values, but to practice those things on a daily basis, this is where the space can come from for like the inner space to recover. And then I think a last thing that I want to highlight based upon some of your comments, Armin, was that Oscar also touched upon this idea of service. And I was listening to the idea of inner work. And often when I have to do inner work, I also get a feeling of sadness because it feels like alone.
Yeah.
Right? And I think one of the things I personally have experienced, that one of the most healing things for my spirit has been to serve. When you respond to the needs of others, a lot of my inner mumbo jumbo, confusion, mindless, things I think are important, just simply do not matter. And I think this is, just doing something like totally generously without the interest of direct reciprocity is so healing. And it has an explosive effect on indirect reciprocity within the communal world. And I think so these are some of the practical things that came to mind. And if people become those protagonists, then they love to change. They're driving change. Right. And I think that's fundamental.
But that's what I feel so I don't know the English word for schizophrenic or about our society, that
schizophrenic.
We're being taught every minute that exactly the opposite. Yeah. Yes. And so
but isn't this leadership, Armin? Like the question, like not who is leading you, but what, to what do you respond? What is leading you? Yeah. Not who are you trying to make to follow you as a leader, but who are you responding to, right? Yeah. Whose call, whose need? I think it was Viktor Frankl who said, like, life becomes really meaningful if you dedicate it to the need of someone else or an unfinished work, right? And that's really where I think meaning comes from. Just some of my,
if I might, this is the distinction I think is so simple, so powerful. So when Oscar said, if you work for a company, you're an employee. If you're part of a community, you're a member. And that's just profoundly different. That I belong in the community. Because I'm here, I'm included. And I can thrive and prosper and do good and be supported by that. We talked this morning about the idea of I often talk about in my work about, being willing to fail and experiment and go forward. But in my mind, it's always me doing it. But if you're in a network of people, there's a resilience about that. There's an incredible support that comes from the network of relationships. That's why if you think of your business as a community, oh my God, all kinds of other things begin to happen that are instantly powerful and give give you a feeling of strength and resilience. So we have a few minutes left, and I want to ask if Saskia or Anucha, I'm going to mispronounce your name, I'm sorry. If you'd like to comment or observe, we want to hear your voice also.
Oh, well, thanks for all the sharing. I was wondering, because well, we mentioned COVID, and now we have this next challenge facing us, which is war in Ukraine. And listening to that's why I wanted to hear what you had to say about capacity building and the impact on how to build a community. I was wondering, how can we apply that? You know, it's also, you mentioned serving. It's also something that brings me energy, but at this point in time, it brings me frustration. Yes. And I was wondering how to build a community. We don't need to be together physically. We've learned that. I mean, we can transcend that. But how can we make use of your experience to serve that purpose? How does it inspire you?
No, it's a beautiful question. You know, two things came to mind as at this. You know, what you mentioned about the frustration of service. Service is actually, it's not easy because you need to sacrifice many of your things in order to serve. You know, because it's many times you sacrifice your personal interest for the interest of somebody else. You know, you sacrifice your time for the times of somebody else. You know, and it's something that you know, the word sacrifice is a word that we don't use too much, but means sacro, that in Latin means holy. It's something that is holy by nature. A sacrifice is something that is elevated by nature. It's something that is there, you know, it's not something that you do. And therefore, I think communities, they have at the center, the communities that they have at the center the Holy Spirit of service are communities that thrive because the community is more than the sum of the individuals of the membership. Therefore, they need to have a common purpose and a common will. And to have a common will in a world that we have been educated to be yourself and stand for your own interests and to hear your own voice, and everything is about you. You know, we are the center of the universe. To say in the community, it's not about you, my friend. It's something very challenging. You know, because you have this idea that is not communism, because I just put very clear, the word is coming from the same background, common, that means all together, belongs to us, like community, like communication is in common, you know, but it's not communism. It's not everything belongs to the community. No, the individual, there's a very delicate relation between three players, three protagonists of society. One is the individual, the second is the community, and the third are the institutions who are the service of the community and the individuals. And in these three relations, you know, the community always will protect the interests of the individual.
Just wanted to add also to Anusha's question that I really also appreciate your question and the challenge you bring in, Anusha, of sometimes feeling hopeless, maybe even in those crises, and the question, how do you serve? I work a lot with the people of the climate and sustainability movement currently, and there's also like almost a level of despair coming up, right? And then how do you do it? And just wanted to share that more than ever, I realized that what we're trying to build at Soul is not something for today or tomorrow. The problems that we have created, the injustices that we see in society, are not problems that have been born yesterday and can be solved tomorrow. So I think this, the path of community building and capacity building, it can have wonderful fruits, but most of the time it's not a rose garden. I can tell you from experience. It's not like the mamas and the papas are playing all the time and everybody's happy, right? It's also conflict and being able to resolve those conflicts. It's also sometimes frustration, but then building the resilience to overcome it. So it's really at the core level, not solving the problems we see all around us, but it's trying to focus on what is deeper. I like what Armin also referred to, which is building the conditions for people to have like a safety net in society.
Sure. Just one little point. Perhaps you can explain the 4 levels of unity, because the question of Anusha is actually this idea of what is holding the community together. I don't know if you would like to explain that.
Yeah, but 2 things. I want to look at time,
Yeah, we have
and I
about
want to hear and I want to hear Saskia if possible. So if we have time, I can share it. Otherwise, we can also maybe invite the friends for another conversation at one point to deepen a lot of things. But I also just wanted to acknowledge the depth of the question that Anusha also asked, like how to deal with those things, community building, capacity building in the face of crises. And I actually believe it can liberate us because you can do small things. Maybe not prevent a war, maybe not prevent climate change, but you can learn how your house, neighborhood, workplace, like can expand. This is also part of the project, for example, in El Salvador with the youth, that the first thing they do is not to take an action to change the world. The first field of activity is to take an action in your house, in your home. Can you do something that looks insignificantly meaningless, like clean your room? But then you learn that you can clean stuff, which is a capacity that you can expand to larger spaces. And then maybe from working at home, you can go to your neighborhood. And from your neighborhood, you can go to your communities, which are beyond neighborhoods. So you can build those capacities unpredicted with the context that you work in. If you learn to listen in one place, you've learned to listen, right? And this is why we try to, so that's why we focus on small actions in the beginning, because it can help us to see progress. Saskia, please.
I have a voice too. Yes, I can speak too. Thank you so much. I think like what struck me most from what you told was the part of people become part of this imagination and respond to it and become responsible. So this responsibility, we often take it from a very, okay, you are responsible for, like, okay, take it and it's done to us. But from taking this to this inner level, this transformation from within, so you respond and become responsible from that. This was really like a key, but I still digest kind of. But maybe if you can a little bit like dive into that, how you enable that from an individual perspective as well, that you open up for that you don't take responsibility as we usually take it.
I think, words are important, right? And sometimes you need to be accurate and specific. This morning I was at a meeting with a client and he said, like, I try to, give power away, mandate away. So I asked my colleague, do you want to be accountable? And she started crying like, oh my God, no. And I can understand, because actually I said, you almost ask, can I punish you when you don't perform? Right? That's almost the question that you asked. When you talk about responsibility, you talk about the ability to respond. It means that the other person is at the center of making the choice to respond. So this is why we ask questions. And then, so I was at a workshop one day doing an agent of change. Someone took a small action. It was someone in the company who was like, I think she was, I don't know what she was doing, but apparently she was not seemed to be very important to the managers. She cleaned her desk. And then the manager said, is that all you did? See? So immediately someone stopped and said, stop. She showed that she can take action while all of us have apathy. We're not doing anything. She has more capacity than we do. Right? And I think this was like, and then everybody understood the importance of something small, because that was progress. It doesn't, what was happened was not so important, but the fact that she could take an action. Well, others had like 1,000 excuses. They didn't understand. They thought it was vague. They thought it was abstract. Whatever kind of ideas they could find outside themselves, she did something. And she found the courage to translate it into action. Now she can grow her capacity to take more meaningful actions. The rest first need to learn the first step. So this is something very small, like how it works. And then you have to develop the eye to see someone trying to grow their capacity to do something. And then sometimes it may end up in something fantastic. And sometimes, most often, it's invisible, but that's also fine because the act in itself can be elevating, right? But to identify progress, to see progress, even when it seems insignificant. I mean, we can all see the war, right? We can all now see climate change right now. But today, I think 50 years ago, there was a book published in 1972 called Limits to Growth. It's today, 50 years ago, exactly, by the way.
Is it?
And yes, and those people saw. Buckminster Fuller, in fact, written a book in '67 called Operation Manual for Spaceship Earth, where he talked about the depletion of the sources and invented a car that was driving on water. He saw. Before him, in the 19th century, people have written books about it. So to develop the eye to see progress is one of the capacities, I think, for people who can really become like perpetuators of community building. They see those capacities in others and are able to nurture it, to encourage it. So I think this is one of the things that we can all learn, to see potential in others and try to name it, try to not to give them compliments and say, well done, but to invite them. And that will grow the capacity to respond. You know, it's always in the small things.
Good.
Sorry for
And-
my extensive.
No, no. And I think we're at time. I don't know if they're going to, we may be thrown out. In the chat, there is a link to Spatial Chat, which is another room that we can go to begin to continue the conversation. And I invite everyone who'd like to discover more, talk more, explore these set of ideas, this connection to each other more, to go to Spatial Chat and continue talking. And Sjoerd and Oscar are saying hello.
If you ever want to just continue the chat also beyond the Spatial Chat, we can also set up a conversation and just explore together how we could collaborate and do meaningful stuff together. We're really keen also to find more people to collaborate with and learn with and see how we can add stuff. Don't hesitate to send an email. I'll go to the Spatial Chat immediately. Tim, thank you so much for hosting us.
It's been a really incredible pleasure meeting you guys. I mean it. It's like, whoa. As I said to Oscar at the end, I said, my soul got bigger. I really appreciate we're going to talk more later, but wow.
Thank you very much, Tim, for your kindness. And thank you very much for coming, friends. Armin, Carol, Anusha, Saskia.
Thanks.
And recording. Bianca. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening, wonderful day.